All right, welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. I'm Rafai Seni.
I am Adesola Omoran.
And I am Shaiton Atigari. Good morning.
Well, as Nigeria continues to seek other ways of increasing internal revenue generation, the federal government of Nigeria is beginning to focus more on the gap in taxation. It is in this regard that a proposal is being made at the National Assembly for the introduction of the Communication Service Tax Bill.
Oh, yes, sir. So the bill which seeks to impose and collect communication services tax on charges payable by consumers of electronic communication services in Nigeria, excluding private electronic communication services at the rate of 9%, is seen as a reality that will happen soon. I mean, that's if it passes second and other readings.
Yes, definitely. Some economic analysts believe that following the harsh reality of global decline of crude oil prices, Nigeria can no longer rely on oil revenue to sustain the economy. And that is why the federal government of Nigeria is probably looking for various ways to identify and explore alternative sources of generating revenue. Joining us now to discuss the proposed introduction of the Communication Services Tax Bill is Dr. Yele Okeremi, a former president of the Nigerian Computer Society.
Thank you so much for joining us this morning on the show, Mr. Thank you so much for joining us on the show this morning.
No, I
a lot of diverse reactions have trailed. A lot of diverse reactions have trailed this proposal. The FIRS boss says that it's nothing because Nigerians talk a lot on phone. But let us take another reaction, and that's the comment of Olushola Teniola, who is the President Association of Telecommunication Companies in Nigeria, during an interview on Arise Global Business Report.
I think that at the 8th Assembly we had based it on trust that the distinguished senators would keep their word, and it looks like they haven't kept their word. The senator that was behind the last bill, where it was set aside, is now the same senator who's bringing it up, and he's using it as an excuse to say that his constituents are complaining about the increase, or the proposed increase from 5% VAT to 7.5%. Well, this is a 9% charge on a 5% that's already applied to these services.
Indeed.
So it's a huge delta on basically the people that he says are not going to be impacted. This will actually impact the constituents he's representing, because it will impact the poor, because the poor do use the phone, the mobile phone, to carry out businesses.
Indeed.
The everyday market person uses it to communicate, and it's changed the lives of Nigerians. So a lot of Nigerians cannot do without the phone being beside them. So there's a larger base that will be impacted rather than the current taxpayers that represents 13 million out of the 70 million. So we say, you know, even if it does increase the VAT, which is on luxury items or consumed, the 13 million that are currently paying taxes should be increased. You know, let's say they give themselves a target of 50 million. You know, you don't really need to apply this very punitive and I think discriminate tax onto the...
Well, also the Nigerian Senate has rejected the proposed 7.5% value-added tax currently planned by the government to take effect by January 2020. Now, the earlier VAT increase would ultimately create grave discomfort for a larger percentage of Nigerians, as the prices of goods and services were bound to hit the roof. Meanwhile, the senators are seeking a legislative action to impose a 9% tax on communication services. Once again, welcome to the show, Dr. Yele Okeremi. Those reactions you have seen, but make economic sense of this. The lawmakers are saying a 2.2 increase in VAT will be grave. But here they go around and bring up a 9% tax increase on telecommunication. As you heard the president of the telcos company in Nigeria say, it's not actually 9%. It's 9 plus already existing 5, which is about 14%. What's your take?
No, well, that's true, actually, because there's already VAT on communications already, and so you are introducing another 9%. Now, first of all, I want to even know what the status is with the increase in VAT, because I think that's already fait accompli in a way. So, and I heard the distinguished senator on one of the programs who was proposing the bill, saying that actually this bill was supposed to be in lieu of an increase. And if you already have a fait accompli, you know, in the increase in VAT. Why pursue this? So one of the things I've seen is that, and it makes me very unhappy, there's a very huge disconnect between people in government and the rest of Nigerians. So when people go into government, they begin to behave and think that they are government. They fail to recognize the fact that they are Nigerians and they are just trustees for a short time. And so I wish as a businessman that I could do the kind of things that people in government do. When the company is broke, I just increase prices and everybody has to accept it. I wish I could do so, but I can't. But that's the real world. But let me say something, and this is very interesting. One of the challenges that we have had over the years, and I'm not discussing just this government, over the leadership of this country and African countries generally, why we sit on huge resources and yet we are still very poor, is lack of creativity of government and leadership. So whenever the government is broke, the only thing they think about is tax the beasts of burdens, who are Nigerians. They do not have creativity to think, are there ways we can unlock wealth?
What are those ways to unlock wealth? Because when you look at the recently released budget, I mean, the budget projections that were yesterday, you will see that it looks as though the economy is already locked in a corner. Take, for instance, recurring expenditure, still about a sizable part of the budget. Absolutely. Nothing is happening. Yes. Non-oil, nothing is happening.
Yes.
So what are the other ways? Maybe they are not seeing these ways.
They cannot see it because a good number of them are not trained to see it. So what I mean, and
Let
I don't
them see these ways.
So that's why we are here to engage and to prefer alternatives. So, for example, and I heard the distinguished senator say that, after all, Ghana. But did he also hear the minister in Ghana talk about going for tax cuts and tax breaks? So when it suits them, they cite Ghana. They don't see the other side of it. So let me explain some things. So you want to do copy and paste. Now, in business and for people who actually create wealth without stealing, you understand the real meaning of creativity. So I'll tell you what. You understand that if you really want to become rich, you have to understand the meaning of investments. So just like you said, you still have a huge percentage of these revenues on recorded, and I'm not even talking about recorded, on buying SUVs. You see the Speaker of the House, you see the Senate President, you see the President driving convoy of 30, 50 indecent cars, as far as I'm concerned, paid for by Nigerians. And when the cars break down, Nigerians must pay more. So, for me, for example, I want to see certain things. When a company needs to make more money or to have more profit, they think in two directions. How do we increase revenues? How do we cut costs? I haven't seen sincerity and seriousness in cost management.
Cutting on their part.
I haven't seen anything.
A lot of them will argue with you and say the reason why he's saying,
yes,
let's bump up this telecoms taxes, is the fact that when you look at it, when it used to be sold as recharge cards, it was inclusive of VAT. But now most of the recharge card transactions are made digitally.
Yes.
And obviously, it's not accounted for. The VAT is not accounted for in that. I mean, which time have you used your phone, or which time have you bought recharge card last in the last 10 years? You all do this transaction online, but there's no VAT for it any longer. But if it was just a normal recharge card, it's VATed. So that's why he's saying, because it's going digital, and digital is not taxed. That's some argument some people are making.
So again, that speaks to some level of ignorance. How does the channel, whether I'm buying card or it's digital, define whether it's VATable or not? When you bought recharge cards for 1,500 or 500 naira, as the case may be,
it was inclusive of VAT.
If 500 naira is the face value, which included VAT, same thing applies, because I know for sure that more than 4 years ago, the FIRS came up with a bid that they wanted to be able to monitor the collection of the VAT on telecoms. So the fact that the recharge cards are not being sold again doesn't mean the VAT element is not already there. The VAT element is already inclusive in the face value of it. So if somebody is saying that the reason why we want to do this is because there's no VAT, you can quote me that that person is ignorant of the real facts on the table.
You know, based on the current on the current 5% VAT that we're discussing, they were able to raise 450 billion naira in 2018. Has that been accounted for? And also, moving, my second question to you as well is, it's only gone through the upper chamber of the National Assembly once, and it still needs to go through 2 more steps before it is put into the law. Now let's look at the angle of privacy here. You know, the terms of the bill may lead to significant compromise of people's privacy, depending on how they want to. The way in which the collection is going to be made, because they're going to have access to people's servers. Is there what's being done about that? Because that in itself is an infringement of people's privacy.
I actually read that somewhere, and I'm not concerned about that at all, because you see, really the status quo doesn't change. I mean, so if you want to collect VAT or you want to collect communications tax, the way to do it is very straightforward. And it's the same way they do other taxes, like withholding taxes, VAT. The agent for collection of the VAT is the service provider. So once you pay for your recharge card or your credit, the service provider knows what to do. The accounting is very straightforward. The part that is billable to the airtime, and then the part that is billable to what's now being proposed, communication tax payable, will be done automatically. So I really don't see any change about privacy issues. Honestly, I don't see any issues about that at all. But I'm concerned about the notion itself of further taxes.
What are the likely impacts of this, if any, on startups particularly who use communication for their businesses?
Now, so that's the real meat of it. So when I heard the distinguished senator talking about this, you know, he made a very interesting statement. Oh, Nigerians talk a lot on phone.
The FIRS boss also said that.
Well, that shows myopia on both sides. That's all they can think. If the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem presents as a nail. All they know that they use phones for is talk. They don't know that majority of the people who are actually productive in this country use phones to drive their businesses. There are several phone lines today that no voice is activated on it. It's 100% data. That's the only way some people connect to the internet. That's the only way people have livelihoods. So all they think about is, I talk a lot. They do that a lot. I don't. Majority of productive Nigerians don't. But that's the only thing that comes to their own minds. And I feel extremely sad about this, because it shows a complete disconnection between people who lead us and who we are. That's really bad for us. All of them talk about the same things. They do not see telephones as productive issues. You and I know that. Look at the Apapa Road, for example. How do people transact business? The roads are broken down today. A lot of businesses happen by communication. So while they only see telephones as calling their girlfriends and having parties, having chit-chats that are absolutely unproductive, we see it differently.
Another part to this conversation, and this will be answered when we come back from this break, is the fact that they say this is to target those in the, middle class of the society, that it will not target those in the lowest rung of the society. But recently, Nigeria Communication Commission brought out a stat that says over 117 million phone lines are in Nigeria now. What's your take on that? We'll come back and talk about that, Dr. Okeremi, after this break. All right, welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. And we're talking to Dr. Yele Okeremi, and we're talking about the proposed communication tax in this country. So I was saying, they said this was going to affect, the sort of like the middle class. And the question in my mind when I heard that was, does Nigeria still have a middle class? And when you look at the recent numbers by Nigeria Communications Commission, it says 176 million lines, with a tele density of 91.3%, a broadband density of about 33%, over 60 million broadband lines. All of this will have the impact of this tax. I mean, is this the middle class going to affect?
So Incidentally, I had the opportunity to watch the distinguished senator in defending his bill. And I could also see that he also admitted he was ignorant of so many things with his own mouth. And some of the things he said, he said, oh, for him, he could afford it, but that he was representing his people. So I want to say the first thing that when we really look at how these things play, and you are right, he said that he has 4 lines, and that the 170 million lines that are being peddled by NCC doesn't really reflect the population of mobile phone holders. But he also forgot to say, or to think actually, that when the government itself wanted to catalyze agriculture, what did they run to?
Mobile phones.
Fertilizers. Fertilizers. Now, who are those people holding those mobile phones?
Farmers.
Farmers.
Are
they in the middle class that he's talking about? So,
subsistence farmers.
Absolutely. So one of the things like I keep saying is there is no rigor in governance. So what happens is that many people in government, the first beer parlor idea that comes into their head is made to sound like a research discovery. Because if people were able to think deeper and subject their thoughts to deeper analysis, a number of the things they say would never even come out at all. So when it comes to their head, then they come and make it look like, oh, I've done research. What research did you do?
He said he's done research.
But again, I mean, so
he said he's done his due research, and he also posted the antecedents of Ghana.
So again, then that's what they call research. But again, we are now subjecting the research to rigor, using his own data, because, I mean, I'm talking about data from governments. And we can see that the logic seems not to be standing at this particular point in time. Now, so when he says when you do a flat tax, so what people do not understand about taxation is taxation does 2 things. It's fiscal policy. But the first thing taxation does, which is what all of them see, is that, okay, it increases government revenue. But then when countries, you have possibilities of what you call progressive taxation. And even in theory and practice, there's a regressive taxation. So what progressive taxation actually does is to try to see whether it could reduce the Gini coefficient, to reduce wealth distribution. But you have a flat tax of 9% on anything, and you say to me it's only going to affect middle class or upper class, it won't affect lower class. Does that really make sense?
So what you're saying is that, as they say, flat tax plateaus the economy.
It's periodically it's a leveler. So when people say some of these things, I'm asking myself as somebody that has a brain, how did they come about it? Because everybody is subject to the same thing. Now, so what they wanted to say is, oh, if I spend 20,000, the amount I pay will be more. But they also forget that the effect of 20,000 naira, I mean, some of you in this room, some of us, you probably go have lunch with your friends and you spend maybe 5,000, maybe 10,000 on lunch. That is probably somebody's salary for a whole month. So the effect of 10,000 on you is different from the effect of 500 naira on the lowest people. And this is what people are failing to see. And so you say you are targeting only certain people. It's not really true.
But globally, economies are turning to the digital economy.
Correct.
In fact, the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation, says the digital economy is becoming the economy itself. And you cannot ring-fence it from taxation, from other sectors of the economy.
And I agree.
And when you look at the reality in Nigeria, revenue generation, which you mentioned, is critical.
Yes.
You look at the 2020 budget the president presented yesterday, 8.155 trillion naira is what is targeted for revenue for 2020. Yes. Out of that, for non-oil taxation, they are looking at a 1.81 trillion naira. And I'm wondering, perhaps the government is thinking, the digital economy, can this sector, the communication sector, be the new cash cow for the government?
And the answer is yes, actually, but with a lot of caution. So smart people understand how life goes. when you have a child, you give birth to a baby, do you immediately start telling that baby to care for you? Actually, this is logical. This is just natural laws. You have a baby, what do? You nurture the baby. After a while, the baby becomes self-sufficient, can fend for herself, and then after a while, you grow old, and then the baby takes care of you. This is just natural. You don't even need to go to school to understand how things work. So if you give birth to your own baby, and from the moment you give birth to that baby, you expect the baby to start producing so that the baby can take care of you, what do you do to that baby? You only need a few weeks for that baby to die. And that's exactly the same kind of thing that is going on here. So if you really want taxes, I will give an alternative to it. The first thing you look at for getting taxes is ensuring empowerment.
Dr. Okeremi, sorry to interrupt your thoughts there. Talking about diversification, the blue economy is important, and there's an ongoing conference in Abuja on global maritime and security conference.
In fact, it started yesterday.
Yes.
Started yesterday in Abuja, and you've got delegates from every part of the nation. They're talking about security of the maritime sector in the world. I mean, I think it's the first of its kind in Abuja, and Nigeria is leading the way as regards this. I mean, if we have audience from there.
Over 38 countries are participating.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that observation. We have taken note. Okay. With this comment, we have come to the end of this session. May I remind our distinguished guests that it's still a work that is very much in progress. We are still taking your inputs by email.
When you come inside,
we are still going to work on it.
No, I came here. I left yesterday.
DG Nemasa had directed, we'll try and reduce to the most relevant 15 or thereabout recommendations. So if you still have inputs, please respond to the emails we have sent earlier on with your inputs. We'll incorporate them. And for the gentleman from ICC who wants all that we have had today, we will send it to you by email as well. Thank you very much, sir. With that, we have come to the end of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Abdurrahim. Please appreciate him and his team. A few announcements before we take a tea break. This event is live on Solve TV on YouTube, just in case you'd like to share with some of your colleagues who are not here and your family members.
I think we just missed a session there at the conference. But the blue economy, talking about fishing, maritime,
security,
transport, water and transport, it's very key.
I mean,
the Gulf of Guinea.
I mean, the Gulf of Guinea has been a very important conversation that's been ongoing for quite some time in the maritime sector. Also, the conversation about the Gulf of Aden,
yes,
which has been the international heartland for terrorism and piracy and the likes and things like that.
Lessons can be learned because the Gulf of Aden is now extra secure.
Yeah,
Speaking about conferences in Abuja, I'm aware that you were at the Nigerian Economic Summit discussing making software a major contributor to the GDP. Can you just give us a bit of, what you took away from that conference and what's being done regarding that subject matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting thing, and so people just sat down and wanted to ask ourselves, do we have to continue sitting down doing the same things, talking about oil or extractive industry, while some other countries that we can see, and the rest of the world has moved on to knowledge. And so we asked a few questions. So is it actually possible for Nigeria to become a software exporter by 2050? And of course, I mean, by the time we finished, it was clear that, the answer is yes. And because the question we should have asked, rather than say, can Nigeria become, is why we haven't even become. What's the difference between us, for example, and India? Is it that the Indians have the kind of brain that is different from that of now, or the blood of Indians is different? And we realize that, no, we are not different.
In about 3 steps, When you check the economy of America, America's big economy, close to over 10 trillion GDP.
Yes.
A bulk of that is from a state called California.
Yes,
2.7 trillion.
Correct.
That's tech.
Tech, absolutely.
How can Nigeria do $2.7 trillion? How can Yabacon service the budget of Nigeria?
So, you see, some of these things are not as complex as we think they are. And one of the things we came up with yesterday is, what do you hear? Because faith cometh by hearing. So what do we hear? Nigeria, we cannot develop software. We don't have the capacity. So that becomes a narrative. And I gave an example yesterday. I said, when we came into this studio, we just came, everybody dragged a chair and sat down. But suppose just while you were outside the door, as we were coming in, you were told that, hang on, the last people that came, the chair collapsed on them. I feel that perhaps we will not be sitting down now. A good number of us will probably be standing up or fidgeting, looking at our seats. That talks about the power of narratives. And narratives are not necessarily reality. So these are some of the things that really need to change. We need to put the proper narratives in place because, indeed, we have more than it takes to deliver solutions.
Thank you so much.
That's a good place to leave it.